Wow. And I thought that the first law was brutal. Woo! Hey, what's up, bookworms? Mike back today to talk a little historical fiction, as today we are dipping into The Warlord Chronicles by Mr. Bernard Cornwell. This is, of course, 1995's The Winter King, 1996's Enemy of God, and 1997's Excalibur, otherwise known as the Warlord Chronicles or the Arthur books, if some have begun to call them over the past few years, I think, really, since I started this. Like, you talking about the Arthur books? Yes, I am talking about the Arthur books, but this is Bernard Cornwell's take on the Arthurian legend, mostly popularized by Sir Thomas Malory and Le Morte d'Arthur, which will come up more than once in this review. Now, this is a story not from the eyes of Arthur or Merlin, so that obviously already kind of takes it to a different little bit of a spin. But this is kind of trying to take it as much of a historical, accurate kind of story as you can kind of tell of the, of the 5th century Dark Ages kind of thing here. So it's one of those things where some people, if they love it, they love it. But if they go to it expecting magic and wizards and warlords and dragons and all that stuff, you're going to get some of that, but you're not going to get the other stuff that you're really, really used to when it comes to the Arthurian legend. But guys, this is my first Bernard Cornwell, and did it meet the hype? Well, that's what we are here to talk about. So let's begin, guys, like usual. Let's get into what is this book about. Now, Uther, the High King, has died, leaving the infant Mordred as his only heir. His uncle, the loyal and gifted warlord Arthur, now rules as caretaker for a country which has fallen into chaos. Threats emerge from within the British kingdoms while vicious Saxon armies stand ready to invade. And as he struggles to unite Britain and hold back the enemy at the gates, Arthur is embroiled in a doomed romance with the beautiful Guinevere. Will the old world magic of Merlin be enough to turn the tide of war in his favor? Time will tell, you guys. This takes us back to 95 to 97. This is The Warlord Chronicles. This series, guys, has so much to talk about that the best way to do it is, like usual, just kind of talk about the good and the bad. I'm going to start with the good first because, guys, I did like a lot of this. I got to say, this being my first Bernard Cornwell, he writes action I would say is second to none. It is really, really great stuff, and I can see a lot of authors that I read that were definitely influenced by this man. Like, I think of John Gwynne, like, immediately when I think about this series. I think that he writes action battles, the one-on-one battles in a duel, as good, if not better, than Joe Abercrombie. And that's the highest compliment I can give, really, because that's always been something I felt like Abercrombie couldn't be touched on, was just a one-on-one fight in the square. That was just something that could not be beaten. I got to say, I think that Cornwell is at least bare minimum on par with Abercrombie on these things. And it's just so good, guys. The action is just so well described, just breakneck speed, and you know what's going on. It's not one of those where it's like, oh, the action is just so confusing, you know what's going on. I think it's really just written so well, but it is just a mile a minute. It's so good. Captures the chaos of battle, but you always know what's going on. That's just great. So be it battles, be it duels, it's just rapid fire. And guys, your heart rate is going to rise a little bit with some of those. I think his character development is just phenomenal in this. I think about where Derfel started this book. I think about where, and I know I'm saying these names wrong, Nimue, I think, and Kynwyn. They all three of those have just incredible arcs through this story. And these are three characters, I didn't know a lot about. I knew Morgan, which is often Morgana. I knew Arthur, I knew Merlin, I knew Galahad, Lancelot, all these characters. These are three characters. Being a big fan of the Arthurian legend, I didn't really know that well. I know the character that Derfel has been based off of in this, but I'll get into that another time. I'll let you kind of dig up the actual history of this if you want to do that on your own. But I think with this, again, where those characters start at the beginning of Winter King and where they are at the end of Excalibur, night and day difference, because this does go through the years quite a bit. I mean, obviously it starts the earliest with Derfel, but I think Nimue is there as well. So it really does they are completely different characters by the end of this. And it's because of the things they go through, which, as you will see through the time, is quite a lot. These characters go through quite a bit. Now, I think another great thing is, and this is going to seem weird to people because I love Sir Thomas Malory's Le Morte d'Arthur. That, to me, is always going to be the gold standard of what the Arthurian legend is. And most of the stuff that just traditional stuff, it comes from that telling. With this, I like that it's not like that. And I love that it kept me guessing, because I was never like, well, I know what's going to happen next. Yes, Lancelot and Guinevere do still do that thing that that they do. There are those kind of things that he doesn't change. But I don't think that he really changes anything just to change it. There's a lot of things that happen the same way they do happen in Mallory's telling. He just presents it in a different way. And I think what really helps with that, what makes this series genius, the way that he does this, is it is a character that was with Arthur the whole time. This is Derfel. And this is a character that is retelling his story to someone else. And he's telling it the way that it happens. And that character's kind of like, oh, I don't like that part. And he flat out says, this is what actually happened, but I have a feeling you're going to tell it a different way. And that's supposed to be the way that the story has been handed down through the years. Basically, Mallory's telling of Arthur is what this character he's telling the story to kind of just made up their own stuff to kind of romanticize a lot of characters. So it leaves a lot of those things up to your interpretation of it. And I love the way he does it. I love the way that he presents, well, was Merlin actually using magic, or was it just a lot of convenience and some, cheap parlor tricks? He kind of presents those things to you, but it really looks like, hey, it could be. It really just depends on you. Do you think that? I love that he leaves that open to your imagination. It's great. But I do like how he changes a lot of things. Like, I think about what he does with Lancelot in this. Lancelot is not the pious, the just, the chivalrous. Obviously he did run off with his best friend's wife, and that's very much the way he does. Much worse things in this series than run off with his best friend's wife. And at first that was like, for me, that was like, wow, this is crazy. I mean, this guy is just supposed to be like the best of the best out there. And the most honest and chivalrous, whatever. He's just a slug in this series, and it's kind of one of those things where you realize, guys, history is written by the winners, and they're going to romanticize things quite a bit. So I love the way that he does things like that. I think it's really, really well done, and it'll keep you guessing, because again, it's one of those things where you kind of forget what you know or think that you know, and you got to kind of roll with it. And I love the way that he presents that thing. It kept me guessing or whatever. But I got to say, guys, the brutality of this, I think this captures what life was like in the Dark Ages oh so well. And that's not going to work for everybody, but things weren't nice. There was a lot of suffering to peasants, and a lot of cruel things that happened to lower class folks. It really did happen this way, and he doesn't shy away from that at all. You will not see him pull any punches. He never fades to black. He's going to tell you exactly what's going on and how awful it is, and how this is just the way that it is. There's nothing really we can do through that. But it's definitely not for the weak at heart. It is. No one is safe, guys. Women, children, does not matter. No one is safe in this story, and you will have a couple times where you're just like, jeez, you're putting the book down, just like, God, what is next, really? So, but the realism, guys, I love how well he presents this time period in, just the history of humanity is presented just oh so well and so accurate. And he doesn't try to, make anything look more glamorous. You do read Mallory, and everything does seem really, really glamorous. And he's going to tell you, this is what it was actually like. But let's talk about Merlin here. I think that Merlin's character in this, it's his relationship with Derfel that is just so good. He basically talks to Derfel like, it's one of those things where like you love your kids, but you feel like they are way underachieving. That's kind of the way that he talks to Derfel. It seems like he's really just being extra hard on him. It's just because he knows Derfel's special, and he knows, I need to push this guy. He gets way too sentimental. I need to make sure that he focuses on the right kind of things. It's one of those kind of tough love things. You can tell he does love the character, but man, he rarely lets him know that, So we know that as the reader, but Derfel's, never really sure. And I know apparently the way to say his name is Dervel. Well, I don't audio, guys, so I'm saying Derfel. And the names in this book, if you don't audio, it's anyone's guess how to say some of the names in this book. But I gotta say also, the romance in this is actually surprisingly well done. It was one of those things where I did not realize I wanted these two characters to get together. It wasn't something that I needed until it happened, and I was like, yes, I think I do like this quite a bit. And spoiler, I'm not talking about Arthur and Guinevere, so calm down. That one, really, I'm like, hey, Arthur, you made your bet on that one, bro. But a lot of things in this series is like, if you guys would have just not acted a fool about women, a lot of lives could have been saved. But hey, again, that's history, right? But I think this series has a lot of good redemptive arcs as well. Characters you never expected to be redeemed do have some redemptive arcs in this. And it's characters that I thought, okay, yeah, you're beyond the point of redemption. I don't even want it. And then I was like, okay, that's pretty good. I like that. So I think that's really up there in like a George R.R. Martin way, where he would always take a character, make them completely unlikable, and you're like, there's no way I'm going to like this. And then by the end, you're rooting for them, So that's very well done. It's a great talent right there. like I say, some of the most incredibly satisfying moments in this series, man, where we're just out loud, you'll be just cheering and fist pumping and just having a great time. As much of a great time as you can with as much death that is in these books. But there are some things where he will build up some characters that you love to hate, and you love when bad things happen to them. And bad things happen to everyone in this series, guys. So there is no, like I said, there is no one safe. But I love the narrative choice, like I said, telling it almost like an unreliable narrator because of the way that it's going to be retold through this character he's telling the story to. That's a great, great idea to explain away a lot of the, where did you come up with this, over, what, the Arthurian legend actually presents. But is everything perfect? No, it never is. Are there some things that, might not work for you? These didn't necessarily, not work for me, but they might not work for you. I'm going to bring them up here. The names are going to be a struggle, guys. Again, the names in here are really like Scrabble. Like he just had pieces left on a Scrabble board and said, how do I make a name out of this? Apparently, a lot of these is the accurate way to say a lot of these names. But again, trying to read them, you just kind of make up a word in your heads. Like there's... I can't even think about how to spell the character's name, but I just started calling him like Cullif because I had no idea how to say his name. There's lots like that. I can't think of any particular instances right now, but when I was reading them, I just would either glaze over or just make like a G word or a C word to kind of just blah, 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 to kind of get used to that character's name. But so it'd be hard in a conversation to bring up, what about this character? Because I'd be like, who are you talking about if they audioed only? So there is that. Also, the biggest complaint about this series is that this book right here starts really slow. Now, it's one of those things like, yes, you will feel like that at first because he is establishing a lot of things up front. A lot of characters, a lot of, regions and lands and territories and laws and all those things. And he makes a decision where Arthur and Merlin do not show up in this story until like page 200. So there is that. So if you go in this expecting to be palling around with Arthur from page 1 and everything's just going to be exciting, it's not going to happen that way. Personally, I never have a problem with that. I understand that an author has to establish the world and characters first, but that could be something that does bother you. But I'll say, guys, each one of these books has like 4 parts. By the end of part 1 of this book, it takes off and it doesn't let up again until the series concludes. At least for me, it was never a slog for me at all. But those first 200 pages can be rough for some people. But just trust me when I tell you, it's worth it, guys, and it will have a good payoff. And again, yeah, this isn't a story about Arthur. This is very much about the people around Arthur. So if you're just wanting a hero's journey of Arthur, you're not going to get it here. He is very much a side character. He's very, very much prevalent, but he is never a character that you follow through this series. You are seeing this through the eyes of Durfel. So it's just go into that, expecting that. I think it'll be a little better for you. And again, kind of what I touched on earlier, it might be a little too grim for people. Atrocities of war are not covered up. Cruelty to the lower class. There is, sexual violence, all kinds of things like that happen a lot here. Like I said, women and children do get mutilated in this series. So it's going to be things that can be tough for you to read. But again, if you're going for historical accuracy, these are things that did happen in, 5th and 6th century. It really did happen this way. So it's just got to be one of the things. You're reading historical fiction at this time period, guys. You've just got to accept those things are going to be there. But if you are queasy over those things, or that does really bother you, I don't know. I'm just telling you to proceed with caution on this one. So that's always just going to kind of depend on you. But how about why I think that you guys should read it? I think if you've read any of the traditional Arthurian legend, you're going to like this for the challenge. Because it is a challenge of being like, okay, like I said, you got to forget what you know or think that you know. You're really going to have to be like, I got to let these things go and see what he's doing with it here. If you haven't read the Arthurian legend, you're not going to have a problem with that at all. You're going to like it because it's just going to seem like something completely fresh and new to you. Just treat it like you would any other fantasy series, and I think that you will be fine with that, even though this is not a fantasy story. That's something you got to think about here. I think it has a very realistic portrayal of, like I said, life in that time period. It's something that a lot of stories always kind of just romanticize, make it seem very shiny and happy, and it wasn't. It was dirty. It was miserable, guys. You had to sometimes wonder when or if you were going to get your next meal. That's just life like this in this time period. So it's things that were very much, it was a tough way to live. That's why people would have like 12 kids and 3 live. It was just a very, very tough time to live in. So that's going to be something I think that will be very eye-opening if you haven't read any historical fiction up to this point. You already read like, super serious high fantasy that's really all about, the world building and the characters, and you never really gets into, how tough it is to stay alive in this time period, outside of people trying to shove sharp metal objects in your side. And I gotta say, Bernard Cornwell, look, small sample size. I've read 3 books now, but the guy's he's a damn brilliant writer. I mean, if you are one of those sadists who likes to mark in your books, I think this might be one of those where you are just highlighting passages all the time, because there's just some gorgeous, gorgeous stuff in here. And there's one in Enemy of God where something happens to a child, let's put it that way, and I read that passage like 6 times. While my allergies started to flare up. It's just so good. He's a great writer, just brilliant wordsmith, and you're never going to find anything to complain about, I think, in his writing. And I think if you this series, to me, if you take like the Arthurian legend, Lemort to Arthur, Sir Thomas Malory, and you mash it up with John Gwynne's Faith from the Fallen, I think that's kind of what you're getting here, is that fast-paced action. It really focuses on a lot of the battles and the characters and their growth over time. And, you start with that coming of age, you come up all the way to the end of the character's life, and it's just it's a journey. It really, really is. And I think that you will find plenty to like here. As for my final thoughts here, I think this was the absolute best place for me to start with Bernard Cornwell. Now, look, I have watched The Last Kingdom. I have not read Saxon Stories. That's obviously what put him on my radar, was loving The Last Kingdom so much. So I'm glad that I started here, because a trilogy is much easier, obviously, to digest than it would be a 13-book, a series about Uhtred. Even though I really do want to do that eventually, but I think it's the best place because I love the Arthurian legend, and it really gives me a taste for this guy's writing style. And I haven't, besides Pillars of the Earth, I don't think I've read very much historical fiction. So I think this is a really great place to kind of cut my teeth on that little subgenre here, and I do like what I have seen, and I can see why he has such a devoted fan base, because the guy seems very, very competent. It seems like he does his homework on the historical accuracy, maybe not so much of the characters as much as like what life is like in this time period. I think that's something that really just gets swept under the rug a lot in fantasy, and I think he's kind of raised the bar for what I should expect with historical fiction going forward. So that can be either a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But I mean, this story had everything, guys. Coming of age, romance, battles, betrayal, courage, defeats, victory. All that stuff is here. So if you are just here for that kind of stuff, it's great. Just don't be expecting, like I said, dragons and crazy magic and all that kind of stuff. I think you're going to be satisfied even if you are just a high fantasy reader. So there's those things. If you don't need like a super crazy magic system, I think that any fantasy reader will like what they find here. And I think, guys, this is destined to become one of my favorite trilogies ever. And that's not being hyperbolic just because of recency bias. I just think that this is 3, 9, or 10 out of 10 books here. They are really, really good. So I don't really have a ton of complaints about them, except that they ended. And to me, that says this was a great trilogy. So, guys, what'd you think about the Warlord Chronicles? Did you enjoy it? Did it not work for you? Drop in the comments and let me know. I will talk to you there.